Hi, welcome back to True Spoken. I'm Joe Statzer. True Spoken is brought to you by the Butler County Republican Party and a production of True Spoken Productions. You know, we're going to have another great guest tonight, and we're going to have a series of special guests, state, local, national leaders coming up in the next few webcasts. And tonight, Mike Gmoser, Moser with a G, our Butler County prosecuting attorney. He's a fascinating guy. You're going to find out a lot of interesting things about our Butler County prosecuting attorney tonight. And this is the second time we've had a law enforcement official. We had Sheriff Jones on for a webcast a few episodes ago. Tonight, Mike Gmoser, our Butler County prosecuting attorney. That's our two most powerful law enforcement officials in Butler County. And if you're seeing a theme for law enforcement on here, once in a while, yes, that's true. You caught us. Butler County Republican Party has always strongly supported law enforcement. We strongly support the Second Amendment. And when you see what's been happening over the past few weekends in cities like Chicago, where they have Second Amendment control, where they have gun control, but you still see crime just going off the deep end with murders and shootings, we know what does work. It's supporting law enforcement. It's funding law enforcement. It's supporting our Second Amendment rights. It is enforcing the law fairly, justly. Now, if there's reform that's needed, let's find it. We have to treat everybody exactly the same. Race, creed, color, it doesn't matter. We always want to treat everybody in America exactly the same. It's not always been that way. We know that. America is always growing, always getting better, but we need to stand on law enforcement to fix our issues. We support them, we support the Second Amendment, and we're glad to do so. In a moment, our Butler County prosecuting attorney, Mike Gmoser. We are back on True Spoken, and we are honored to have our Butler County prosecuting attorney, Mike Gmoser. Mike, thank you for showing up here today. I appreciate it.
Glad to be here.
Being on True Spoken. And you're a very interesting person, and I know you don't think that, but you really are. And so we're going to find out some cool things today from you. First of all, you started with some humble roots back in Illinois, and then went to Miami University. I guess that's how you came to Butler County, and then worked for legendary prosecuting attorney John Holcomb. What's some early memories you have from back in those days?
Well, my start really was as a law clerk for the presiding judge of the Butler County Common Pleas Court, and that was Judge Fred Kramer. And he was a really forward-thinking fellow, and he started the first probation department in Butler County, as a matter of fact. And I had the opportunity to not only do legal research for him, which helped me immeasurably when it came to the bar examination. It was almost like cheating. It seemed as though I knew the answers to every question from all of the research that I had done for him. Okay. But sitting in the courtroom also with every jury trial and having the opportunity to see truly the legendary lawyers of that era working in a courtroom gave me a practical experience that no classroom would ever give. I mean, I met the true greats, the Foss Hopkins types, the Leo Breslin types, the Clem DeMichaelis types. Those are lawyers that are since gone, but they were from Cincinnati. And also local lawyers like Hugh Holbrook and one of our common pleas judges, later a Court of Appeals judge, Joe Bressler. To watch them in the courtroom just gave me a tremendous amount of practical experience on how to present a case, what's meaningful, what resonates with a jury. What's the salesmanship involved in persuading a jury to think your way with respect to the facts? So, prosecutors, we like to think that we deal with facts and defense lawyers deal with fiction. Mm-hmm. But everybody has their own spin to things, and that's the challenge in the courtroom. So that was my first experience. Then working for John, he hired me as an assistant prosecutor, and I was able to apply a lot of that developmental understanding to the work as an assistant prosecutor. And I worked with John on the first Rupert trial. We won that case, but it was later reversed because of a technical error that a judge made with respect to a understanding of the three-judge panel, if that was the case, which it was. But the Rupert case, as you know, was the largest mass murder of a family in United States history.
On Easter Sunday.
On Easter Sunday, right. Mm-hmm. Terribly tragic case, and I had a lot of duties with respect to the development of the evidence in that case, and I presented the evidence with John at trial. So that was a wonderful experience. And
sure.
There were other cases, and I became the chief of the criminal division, I think as a result probably of working with him on that case, because I did a lot of the development. And he liked it, so that's how you advanced in the prosecutor's office.
Sure. Why did you want to become an attorney to start with? What was it that drove you for that?
Well, originally I wanted to be a professor, maybe a writer. And I was working on my master's thesis out in Boston, and I was in the basement of a university library with the stodgiest historians known to man. I mean, these people just looked like one step away from the grave, and I thought to myself, this is where I'm going to end up. To write that book for, publisher Parrish, and to be in that genre, I just said, no, I've got to do something better for humanity than being a historian. Nothing wrong with that, but it just wasn't a fit for me. So I drove back to Cincinnati after finishing my research, drove nonstop, as a matter of fact, deciding that I was going to go to law school, at least take a look at one. And there was a law school in Cincinnati. It was closed on Saturday morning, of course. I rolled into town about 7 in the morning. I thought maybe there would be some literature that might be available. And lo and behold, the dean was there, Dean Revelos, wonderful man, a Middletown native, by the way. Revelos family is very well known in Middletown. And he met with me, and he happened to be there working Saturday morning. And he asked about my thoughts and why I was considering law. And of course, I had a lot of time to think as I was driving back from Boston nonstop.
14, 15, 16 hours.
Absolutely. And
Yeah,
I hadn't had a bath, and I was unshaved, so I looked like a ragamuffin, of course. But he asked about my background, about my grades. And he said, Mike, we have a cancellation for a seat, and I'm going to give it to you. But class has already started. So you've got some catching up to do. And I thought, well, that ought to be easy enough. I read a lot. Well, I was behind, but I got involved, and I've caught up. And I walked into class, by the way, and the class was property. And the property professor, Eugene Young's a fantastic professor, a wonderful lawyer too, by the way. They named a library after him. He said, Mr. Gmoser, how nice of you to join us. Have a seat. Very welcoming, and he knew my name, and he actually pronounced it correctly, because as you know, my name is spelled with a G. It's Gmoser. The G is silent. It's an old Austrian name, and it's a kind of a guttural thing, but we don't pronounce the G, at least in my family. Over in Germany, or Austria actually, they do, but not here.
Gmoser?
Gmoser in Austria. It's Moser in the United States, and my father was an airline captain, so with United, and so it was easier for him to just explain it as Moser as opposed to trying to spell it for anybody.
Sure.
So that's how that came about. So I started off in law, and away I went.
There it goes. And that's daunting for most people. You walk in, you get welcomed, and take off from there. So
right.
Very, very good.
Well, and I had some things I had to do. I had to get transcripts and all this stuff that you have to do to go to law school. But I breezed through that, but it was getting into law school was the amazing thing.
Yeah.
Because if I had gone through the ordinary process, it would have been a year away if I was even going to be admitted at all.
I understand.
It was just like, hey, we've got a spot for you. I like you. Come on in.
It was meant to be.
I suppose.
There we go. Well, okay, so we move forward. You were at the Butler County Prosecutor's office. You moved out. You became really one of the most renowned defense attorneys in the area. And then you went back to consider and run for Butler County Prosecutor.
Correct.
What was your thought process leading up to deciding to run for Butler County Prosecutor?
Well, I will tell you, I probably ran for the office for what might be considered all the wrong reasons. One should run for that office because they feel that, among others, they would do the best job. I did it because I didn't want a young man to get the job. I was defense attorney in a prosecution. I won the case, so it wasn't sour grapes for me to run against him. But he was going to be the designated prosecutor after the current prosecutor then went to the Court of Appeals. It was understood that his number was up. He was going to be the prosecutor. And I knew at the time that he would be a bad fit for Butler County. I had no idea at all that I would win that office. Everybody told me, Mike, you can't win. This is a county in which these things are already decided. He's already got the votes lined up. You cannot win. I said, it's not so much about the winning part. I said, when I retire and leave the practice, I want to be able to say that I stood up for what I thought was right because I knew this guy was wrong for the job. So I will lose. But at least I'm going to be one that stood up and say, I'm going to do this for the right reason as far as I'm concerned, to do something for what I consider to be an office that had given me so much as an assistant prosecutor. It taught me the ropes, and I applied all of the things that I learned as an assistant prosecutor to my defense work. The principle of justice always coming first is something that I learned as an assistant prosecutor. It was ingrained in me and as a defense attorney, and I have carried that through into my work now as the prosecuting attorney. Justice comes first. Winning cases always comes second. It's a close second, but it always comes second. Because if winning cases comes first, you'll sell out justice, and justice will fail. And that's what would have happened. So, the net result is, my wife at the time, my late wife, she said, you know, if you're going to do this, you got to give it 100%. I said, okay, and I will. So I went out and I went knocking on doors. I met all of the people in the Central Committee, because it was going to be an appointment, because the prosecutor left early.
Right.
And I went out and met the people, and I was again told, you know, you can't win, but good luck, and that type of thing. So it came the night of that appointment, and it was time for our speeches. And I gave my speech. I gave it like I was giving a defense or a prosecutor's closing argument.
I'm sure it was convincing.
And
Actually,
well, apparently it was.
I was there.
Because I won.
That's right.
And the young
you did
man,
a great job, yes, I remember.
Thank you. And I knew things about the young prosecutor, the assistant prosecutor, that I didn't use politically. But as it came to pass, those things came out. And he was prosecuted for corrupting a grand jury process.
Right.
He was convicted. He lost his license for a year. And he's now hopefully amended his ways, and I believe he's back in practice, and I wish him well. But I hope he learned the lesson and the errors of his way at that time. And so now I want you and anybody who's watching to know that I have truly rededicated myself to the right reason to be the prosecuting attorney of Butler County. Not to take something from somebody, but to give something back to everybody in Butler County.
Great. You know, I think a lot of people watching will agree that the right person got the job, and it's turned out that way. So very good. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
For going by your gut and your heart and doing it. I think it turned out good for all of us. So very good. You know, turning it around a little bit and changing the gears, you have a lot of very interesting interests. For instance, you're a pilot. A lot of people don't know these things, and on True Spoken, we want to kind of get people to know the office holder a little bit better. You're a pilot. Do you have your own plane? How often do you fly?
Well, I have two airplanes. One's a seaplane and one's a regular plane that gets me from A to B safely. It's a very complex airplane, and it consequently needs a little bit of attention on a bi-weekly or a tri-weekly basis. So I fly every 3 weeks. I'm also instrument rated, and that requires me to stay current with the instrument approaches and instrument flying so that I can fly only reference to instruments as opposed to being able to look out the window and see where I'm going. I just fly in relation to instruments. Seaplane flying is more fun. That's entertaining. And I only get to do that in the summer. I have a home in Wisconsin, and I have a hangar there that I keep the plane. And I work on it when I go up there and tinker around and fly it around. There's a lot of lakes in Wisconsin, and it is a real thrill to fly off of water, you know, and to go into places where normally folks don't get to go. You know, you just have to watch, make sure you don't run into high tension wires and things like that. They're out of the way and sometimes unknown in the countryside. You know,
you like to live on the edge a little bit too, huh?
A little bit.
Sure. Yeah, that's what life's all about, right?
Sure.
I find interest. So other things: deep sea fishing, underwater photography, beekeeping, astronomy. Do you just like to stay busy? Do you like to learn things? What's your drive?
Well, you know, this morning I was underneath an old Chris Craft that I'm restoring. It's a 16-foot runabout, they call it. It's a solid mahogany boat, and it's 80 years old. And I've been working on it for the past 6 months. So after work, you'll find me underneath this boat, sanding and scraping and filling and doing all the stuff that you have to do.
But you love it.
I do. I really do enjoy that.
Yeah.
And it's like taking an old piece of furniture and making it new again. You know. So I enjoy doing. I did that with a '58 Corvette. It took me 2.5 years. It was a basket case when I started it, and now it looks as good as anything you'd find on a showroom floor. I think there's a little bit of perfectionist in me. My father was that way because he was an airline captain, and being a pilot as he was, there's no shades of gray with flying. It's yes or no. It's right or wrong. There's no close about it. if you're setting an altitude at 20,000 feet, it's not plus or minus 100, it's 20,000 feet. The course is perfect, direct. It's not left or right so much. There's no error factor. Life is not that way. In my world of law, there's shades of gray. There's explanations. There's reasons for human conduct. So you can't be too rigid. But it is helpful to have some aspects of your personality in a perfectionist mode, as opposed to that other part of your personality that's acceptance, has an acceptance for human frailties and human failures. And I deal with those as a prosecutor every day with respect to the cases. Somebody failed somewhere along the line, or that case doesn't land on my desk.
Right.
And it's often very sad. But yeah, it's flying airplanes is and working on old boats and underwater photography. It's a digital world now. I started out with film, and now I've got digital stuff. You know, the
staying up to date.
Staying up to date.
Yep.
But it's easier now. In the old days, with 35 millimeter stuff, you had lens settings and aperture settings, and you had the certain book values, lighting conditions, strobes, and all kinds of stuff. We still have strobes with digital, but it's all automatic. I mean, no offense to idiots, but an idiot can handle underwater photography now. But there's some beautiful things underwater.
Yeah.
And now the closest I get recently is I've got a 125-gallon saltwater aquarium that I take care of at home, and that's my own little reef where I have coral and saltwater fish and things like that. And that takes a lot of attention. But I make it work, and it's so far so good. I think the most fun that I have is in the rock and roll band that I play in.
Oh, I didn't mention that, yeah.
I played drums in high school a little bit, in college, and I sold my drum kit to pay for my tuition. But after I lost my wife to cancer, I came back to it, and then some fellas auditioned me for a band, and lo and behold, they liked what they heard, and we've been playing ever since. And you'll like the name, Reasonable Doubt.
Reasonable Doubt, there we go. Now, don't you have another law person that's is a judge, right?
Well, actually, no. He's the court administrator for the 12th District Court of Appeals, Ben Manning.
Ben Manning, yeah.
And Ben you talk about a perfectionist. I mean, if I'm a little too fast or I'm a little bit too slow, he lets me know it.
Right. I know Ben. Yeah, I can imagine, yes.
We call him our music director, you know? And you have to be a little bit thick-skinned, because if you weren't thick-skinned, you'd just get tired of him saying whatever he says about whatever's going on. Sure. Not just to me, but everybody else in the band. But he does a magnificent job, and we call him our music director. And he does a great job of that.
Good. Well, that's a lot of fun. I bet that's a good time. Do you play gigs?
Well, we do, yeah. And we also have a little at the one of the members. He has a home where he's got a little bandstand out back and enough acreage in back, so we have a couple programs in the summertime that are free to anybody who wants to show up and bring your own of one of those deals, and they listen to us, and we enjoy playing. We just play for the enjoyment of playing. It's not a money-making thing for us, you know. It's just fun.
A lot of fun.
Yeah.
I got to ask, since I took my son, 14-year-old son, fishing this morning, and we didn't do too well, but he did end up catching a bluegill, but about this big. It's one of the biggest bluegills I've ever seen. Bluegill. And he actually had to wrestle it. So what's the biggest you've ever caught? What's your story for the deep sea fishing? What's your fish story?
Well, there's a lot of them, but the best story that I've got is a buddy and I've got a boat down there. It's what's called a sport fish, and I'm running the rods, and he's running the wheel up on the bridge, and we get into an area of really, really rough water. But all of a sudden, all lines went out. Bam! I've got 6 dolphin on the back of this boat, and just me. And he's up there trying to maintain the boat in this horrible rockiness that's going on. And I'm trying to run these rods so I don't fall overboard, getting these dolphin in. And I'll never forget this. The biggest one of them all was a big bull dolphin. He had to be 5 feet long and probably weighed upwards of 60 pounds. And he was jumping 8 feet in the air, and I was like, good God. And I'm wrestling with him for about, seems like 20 minutes, and finally he broke off. Ordinarily, I'd be heartbroken. I was happy. Thank you.
What an adventure. And you didn't have to hold that thing all the way in,
or clean it. But the other ones, we were able to bring them all in, and some were what they call cows, and some were smaller bull dolphins. And we took I cleaned them all, and we took them all home with us. Flew them back to Ohio.
Great. Renaissance man. And I haven't even mentioned you've written books. You've written a book, right? A fictional book on law or crime or
it's called The Farrier's Son.
Okay.
And it tells the story of a defense attorney who was in a public defender's office. He got tired of handling the guilty and decided to go over, and he was hired as an assistant prosecutor. Mm-hmm. And the tale develops from there.
You know your research then, obviously. You know about what you're writing about there.
And well, the plot came to me because it's a plot line. You know, it's hard to find good plots. Mm-hmm. And, you know, some people have what's called a plot wheel, where you spin a dial and you come up with some crazy ideas. I don't do that. But I always thought to myself, boy, I would just like to have that one gripping plot line that really worked. Mm-hmm. And because as you watch a great movie, you know, there's one that Paul Newman was in. It was a medical malpractice story. And I thought to myself, God, what a wonderful plot to have that. I mean, that author that had that story must have just been buried in the idea of that book. Well, I was watching a program once about a great author, and he said, you know, the only thing I've never written about is such and such. And I thought to myself, that's exactly what I need to do.
Yeah.
So I wrote that book, and it was almost like the story gelled. I mean, there was no ideas that were given to me. The plot was not given to me. The sequence was not given to me. It was just that this is an idea that I took, and it was a minute seed mm-hmm. that was planted in my head, and it grew very quickly. And I said to myself, if I don't write this story, shame on me. Somebody else is going to do it. Mm-hmm. And maybe that particular author will do it, mm-hmm. you know, because he's a well-known author and a great author.
Is there a follow-up coming?
It comes out July 13th.
Wow. Okay. Well, what's it called?
That one's called Spencer's Law.
Spencer's Law.
Now,
okay.
Because
I'm going to hawk it here a little bit. We didn't even know we were going to do this. Put it up.
That's right. And I didn't either.
Yeah, I know.
The farrier's son, his name is Spencer, and his last name is Tallbridge. Spencer Tallbridge. Okay. And he's the son of a farrier. And his father was out west, and as a farrier, somebody that makes horseshoes, essentially, and fits them to horses. And he learned a lot of country wisdom and logic from his father, country logic, about life. And so that plays into some questions he has about justice and how far he can push the envelope on what he believes in compared to what's lawful. So he has this conflict between doing justice and doing the right thing. And do they intersect? And where do they intersect? And what happens when they do? And what happens if they don't? And therein lies the story that I think the readers may enjoy, The Farrier's Son. But it's just one of three. The second one is, as I said, Spencer's Law. Mm-hmm. And it picks up where Spencer's life ended with The Farrier's Son. And so hopefully there will be a third.
That sounds interesting. I'm going to read The Farrier's Son. I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to come back and get Spencer's Law. I'll find it. It
would be a good idea to read the first one. Mm-hmm. And then
right.
Spencer's Law comes out, Barnes & Noble, is July the 13th is the release date from the publisher.
Okay.
These are not self-publishing books, by the way, for what it's worth. And there's nothing wrong with being self-published, but I thought to myself, if I can't find somebody that's interested enough to publish things, I'll just write it for myself, mm-hmm. put it on the shelf, and never talk about it again. Sure. I will have done it for myself. Mm-hmm. That's the way it started. But somebody said, you ought to send this out. There's one fellow from Miami, I sent it to him, and he said, you got to send this to a publisher. You'll get a contract. And I just sort of laughed, but I decided to do it, and lo and behold, there it was.
There it is. Yeah. Wow. So many things that were so interesting. I mean, there's a lot of things there. That's 3 or 4 lives, Mike. I don't think that's just one. Let's get back and kind of follow up and finish up, I guess, with who you are, the prosecuting attorney. You're a self-described conservative Republican.
True.
And there's a lot going on in this world right now.
It really is.
We're not really sure where it's all going to go. Where do you see our county, our state, our nation going in the future? What do you see the future? And I know that's a big, big, big question. But where do you see us really going with so much doubt and so much fear? How do you see our country going from here on out?
Let me give you a Gmoserism, because it struck me the other day, the common denominator of where I see a problem developing with the democracy that we have. And here's the Gmoserism for you. When government competes with capitalism, socialism will follow. Mm. When government competes recklessly, I should have qualified it with that, when government recklessly competes with capitalism, socialism follows. So for those of you that may not understand exactly what that means, it's this. When the President of the United States goes on national TV and says to the general public, or his general following, that I got you $1.9 million, trillion dollars, $1.9 trillion, and now use that as a wedge with your employer. The government is competing with that employer. What the heck is going on with that? Government shouldn't be doing that, in my opinion.
Sure.
They shouldn't be competing with the guy who's the capitalist trying to make a dollar, examining what the wage scale should be, what's fair and what he can pay for. And suddenly he has to compete with somebody that gave somebody $1.9 trillion so they can beat the head of the employer out there who's trying to work. What happens? We have people that won't work because they can make more sitting at home than they can finding a job. Now, the people in Washington seem to scoff at that, but I know that anybody that's watching this has to admit they've gone up to a fast food restaurant window with a sign that says, college education will get you a college degree, signing bonus.
$500 just to sign on, yeah.
Or you go to one that I did last week, it said closed, can't find employees. There's something wrong with that picture, and that's because the government has recklessly competed with capitalism. You know, democracy is an experiment, and when we start tinkering around with some of the fundamentals of this democracy, when government intercedes like that, we're going to have problems that we have a hard time correcting. If we have to buy things with public money to persuade people to go our way, and I think that's probably what happened a lot when somebody promised $2,000 to vote for them. It seems as though there's people that were willing to say, geez, I think I'll vote for that guy because I want the $2,000. And it turned out to not even be $2,000, only turned out to be $1,200. But they were happy to get that.
Sure.
And unfortunately, there's a mindset out there that doesn't see the bigger picture, and that's where education has failed. I'm a big proponent of public education. But we need to be teaching the fundamentals of civics. We don't need to be teaching stuff that doesn't even exist, but we are seeing it as some type of a problem or a solution looking for a problem. And we don't have some of the problems that we are being told we have. And that bothers me a lot.
That's scary. It is.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, that's been fascinating. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a pleasure to know you over these years and work with you, as I do during the day, and having you on this episode of True Spoken. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great time. Thank you.
Likewise. Thank you.